It started on a regular Wednesday. Nothing unusual, really, just another day in the endless loop of life. I walked through the front door around 6:30, same as always, expecting to hear Sarah in the kitchen. But the first thing that hit me wasn't the sound of pots clattering or her voice calling out to me. It was the smell, faint but distinct. Perfume, but not the one I had bought her for Christmas last year. I paused in the entryway for just a second, my hand still on the door handle. My brain filed it away, thinking it was nothing. After all, we've been married for over 20 years. People change things, perfume, hairstyle, routine. I told myself it didn't matter. At least, that's what I thought. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, flashing me a quick smile before turning her back, busying herself with the stove. I walked over and kissed her on the cheek, but even that felt different. She turned away too fast, like she couldn't wait to get back to whatever she was doing. Maybe it was all in my head. We sat down to eat, and I tried to make conversation, talked about my day at work, a new project we were working on. Sarah smiled at the right times, nodded when she should, but she was distracted. Her phone sat next to her on the table, lighting up with notifications, but she didn't seem to care. Not at first, anyway. As the weeks went on, little things started adding up. She began coming home later than usual. "We got a big project," she'd say, or "there's a team dinner after work." Sure, that made sense, but it didn't feel right. Her excuses sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in the mirror before coming home. And the way she said them, like she was trying too hard to convince me, it put a knot in my stomach. One night, I decided to stay up and wait for her. She didn't get home until nearly 10 p.m., and when she walked through the door, there was that same perfume again. I asked her casually how the dinner went. "Fine," she said too quickly. She was tired, she said, and went straight to bed. No conversation, no kiss goodnight. It felt cold. It wasn't just the late nights, though. It was the way she acted when she was home. She used to snuggle up next to me on the couch after dinner, maybe fall asleep watching TV together. But now, she was more distant, spending more time in our bedroom with the door closed, supposedly working. When she was around, she seemed to be going through the motions, like her mind was somewhere else. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One night, about 2 months after I first noticed Sarah's changes, something happened that made me stop dead in my tracks. I was cleaning up after dinner. Sarah had gone to bed early, again claiming she had a headache. As I went to put the dishes away, I noticed her purse lying on the kitchen counter, half open. Now, I'm not the type to go snooping. In all our years of marriage, I never felt the need. But for some reason, that night, I couldn't help myself. Maybe it was the late nights, the distant looks, or that nagging feeling in my gut. Whatever it was, I found myself standing there, staring at her purse, my heart racing. I told myself I wasn't going to dig around, just a quick peek to settle my mind. I reached in, not really knowing what I was looking for. At first, it was just the usual stuff. Her wallet, a few receipts, some gum. But then, tucked into a side pocket, I found something that didn't belong. It was a key. Not just any key, though. This was a hotel room key card. One of those swipe cards they give you when you check in. My first thought was that it had to be old, maybe from a work trip she took months ago. But when I looked closer, my stomach dropped. The logo on the card was from a hotel just across town, a place I knew Sarah hadn't mentioned visiting, at least not to me. I stood there, staring at that key card, my mind racing in 1,000 directions. Why did she have it? Was it from one of her team dinners? Was she hiding something? I could feel my chest tightening, but I didn't have any answers. Not yet, anyway. I put the key back, exactly where I found it, and walked upstairs to our bedroom. Sarah was already asleep, her back turned to me, the soft sound of her breathing filling the room. I stood there for a minute, just watching her, trying to make sense of it all. Should I confront her? Should I wait? Every fiber of my being screamed that something was wrong, but I didn't have the proof I needed. Not yet. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept circling back to that key card, wondering what it meant, what I didn't know. But one thing was for sure, I needed to find out the truth. And I had a feeling the truth was something I wasn't ready for. The next few days were strange. I couldn't stop thinking about that hotel key card. Every time I looked at Sarah, my mind replayed the moment I found it, wondering what it meant. But I kept it to myself. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, and honestly, Part of me didn't want to know the truth. Not yet. So I waited, watching her more closely than I ever had before. The late nights continued, and her excuses became almost routine. She always had a project or some meeting after work, but she'd never give me any real details. Just vague answers that didn't sit right with me. Then one night, a few days after finding the key, I noticed something else. Sarah had come home late again, around 9:30. She looked tired, her hair slightly disheveled, but she smiled at me like everything was perfectly normal. "Sorry, Han," she said, dropping her purse by the door. "It's been a long day." I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was on edge. I watched as she went straight upstairs without even stopping to talk. She usually liked to unwind, have a glass of wine, maybe chat about her day. But not tonight. It was like she couldn't get away from me fast enough. After about an hour, I went upstairs myself. The house was quiet, the lights were off, and as I passed by the bedroom door, I noticed it was cracked open just a bit. Inside, Sarah was on the bed, her phone glowing in her hand. I couldn't see the screen, but I could tell she was texting someone. Again, it wasn't unusual for her to text, but it was how she did it. Quick, nervous glances at the door like she didn't want to be caught. She hadn't heard me coming up, and for a second, I considered stepping in and asking who she was talking to. But I didn't. I just stood there, in the hallway, watching her fingers fly across the screen. After a few moments, she smiled, this small, private smile, like whatever conversation she was having was a secret meant for someone else. I quietly backed away, my heart pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep again. It was the first time I really let myself wonder if there was someone else. I hated the thought, hated the idea that Sarah, my Sarah, might be lying to me. But I couldn't ignore what was happening right in front of me. The next morning, I tried to act normal, like nothing had changed. Over breakfast, I casually asked, "So, what's been keeping you so busy lately?" She looked up from her coffee, her eyes just a little too wide. "Oh, work's been crazy. Same old stuff." Her voice was smooth, but there was a slight hesitation, just enough for me to catch. "Anything interesting happen at the office?" I pressed, keeping my tone light. She shook her head, not even looking at me. "Not really, just the usual." And with that, she stood up, kissed me on the forehead, and headed out the door. I watched her leave, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I didn't know her at all. A few days after that conversation at breakfast, I found myself thinking about the hotel keycard again. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. The small, subtle changes in Sarah's behavior were like puzzle pieces scattered in front of me, but none of them seemed to fit together, at least not yet. That Saturday, while Sarah was out running errands, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I went into her closet. Now, before you judge me, let me explain. I wasn't planning to snoop through her things like some kind of jealous husband. I just wanted to see if I could find anything that made sense of the hotel key. But what I found was strange. Her clothes were neatly hung up, as usual. I scanned through her blouses, her dresses, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, tucked in the back, I saw something that didn't belong, an overnight bag. The thing is, Sarah never used that bag. She had it for years, but she always preferred her suitcase when she traveled for work. Curiosity got the better of me, and I unzipped the bag. Inside, there were a few basic items, nothing too surprising. A change of clothes, a makeup bag, her toothbrush. But underneath all of that, there was something else. A box. A small, gift-wrapped box, the kind you might give someone for a birthday or anniversary. Except, my birthday wasn't for another 4 months, and our anniversary had already passed. I held the box in my hand, turning it over, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. For a moment, I debated opening it. I wanted to know what was inside, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Something about it felt wrong. Instead, I put everything back exactly as I found it, closed the closet, and sat down on the edge of the bed. My heart was racing, and my mind was spinning. Why was she carrying around a gift? Who was it for? Was it for me? Or was it for someone else? The questions kept coming, one after another, but there were no answers. Not yet. When Sarah got home later that afternoon, I watched her closely. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and acted like everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the image of that gift-wrapped box out of my head. It was there, in the back of my mind, nagging at me like a loose thread I couldn't pull. That night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I tried to bring up the topic again, testing the waters. So I was thinking, I said, keeping my tone casual, maybe we should take a trip soon. Just the two of us. Get away from everything for a bit. Sarah didn't even look up from her phone. That sounds nice, she said, her voice distant. But I've got a lot going on at work. Maybe in a few months. A few months? I repeated, trying to hide the disappointment in my voice. Yeah, she said, glancing at me for a split second before turning her attention back to her phone. Things are just really busy right now. I nodded, but inside I knew something was wrong. A trip? A few months? Was that just another excuse? As I sat there, watching her, it hit me whatever was happening, it wasn't going away. And that box? That box felt like the key to everything. But the question was, did I really want to know what was inside? After finding that gift-wrapped box hidden in Sarah's closet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Each day, the weight of suspicion grew heavier. It felt like I was slowly suffocating under the pressure of not knowing. My mind couldn't stop going back to that box, the unanswered questions swirling around in my head. Who was it for? What was it for? Why hadn't she mentioned it to me? I had no answers, just an ever-growing pit in my stomach. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, but every time I looked at her, something in the back of my mind whispered that I wasn't. The distance between us, the late nights, the rushed excuses, they weren't normal. I could feel it deep down. Sarah was hiding something. One evening, about a week after I discovered the box, Sarah came home late again. I'd gotten used to it by now. The quiet dinners alone, her hurried apologies when she finally walked through the door. But that night, something was different. She didn't just seem tired. She seemed distracted. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine, and she barely said a word as she slipped upstairs. I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the empty plate in front of me, my mind racing. I couldn't take it anymore. The doubts, the endless questions, it was eating me alive. I had to know what was going on. Later that night, after she went to bed, I made up my mind. I was going to check her phone. Now, I've never been the kind of guy to invade her privacy like that. In 20 years of marriage, I'd never even thought about it. But something had shifted between us. There were secrets hanging in the air, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. I needed answers. Even if it meant crossing a line I'd promised myself I'd never cross. I waited until she was asleep, the soft rhythm of her breathing filling the room. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached over to the bedside table where her phone was charging. For a moment, I hesitated, staring at it like it was a loaded weapon. My hands trembled as I picked it up, unlocking it with the code I'd known for years. I told myself this wasn't about mistrust. It was about the truth. I just needed to know the truth. I scrolled through her messages, trying not to jump to conclusions. At first, everything looked normal. Conversations with coworkers, a few texts from her sister, some notifications from a group chat she had with her friends. But then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A message from a contact simply named work. I hesitated for a second, telling myself it could be innocent. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. My thumb hovered over the name, and with a deep breath, I clicked on the thread. What I saw next nearly knocked the wind out of me. The messages were brief, but they were intimate. Too intimate for a conversation between coworkers. I can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. Wish we had more time. My hands started shaking. My vision blurred. I blinked a few times, trying to make sense of the words in front of me. There was no mistaking the tone of these messages. Whoever work was, they weren't just a colleague. This wasn't about business. This was personal, painfully personal. I scrolled further, hoping against hope that there would be some explanation, something that would prove I was wrong. But there wasn't. The conversation was full of little hints, small references to nights together, secret meetups. And then I saw it, the date of the last message. It matched the night she'd come home late, claiming she'd been at a work dinner. The same night, I'd sat up waiting for her. I felt like the room was spinning. My chest tightened as a wave of nausea hit me. It was real. It wasn't just in my head. Sarah was seeing someone else. I sat there, staring at her phone, my mind racing. I couldn't believe what I was reading. After 20 years together, 20 years of building a life, of building trust, this was what it had come to. She was lying to me right under my nose. But there was one thing that made it even worse. I didn't know who he was. The messages didn't give any clues about his identity. No name, no photo, just the vague, impersonal title of work. For all I knew, it could have been anyone. Someone from her office, someone from her gym, someone from anywhere. And that uncertainty gnawed at me like a festering wound. I wanted to storm into the bedroom and confront her right then and there. I wanted to shake her awake and demand answers. Who was this man? How long had it been going on? Why had she done this to us? But I didn't. I couldn't. Something inside me told me that I needed to wait. I needed to play this smart. If I confronted her now, she'd deny it, twist the truth, maybe even find a way to turn it around on me. No, I needed more than just a few text messages. I needed hard evidence, something she couldn't talk her way out of. So I put the phone back, exactly where I found it, and slipped out of the bedroom. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying the messages over and over in my head. The words burned into my brain, each one a dagger to the heart. I can't wait to see you again. The next morning, Sarah acted like everything was perfectly normal. She got up, made coffee, and kissed me goodbye on her way to work. I watched her go, my stomach turning with every step she took toward the door. I wanted to scream, to tell her I knew everything. But I stayed quiet. For now, over the next few days, I became a man on a mission. I kept a close eye on her, watching for anything out of the ordinary. And the more I watched, the more I saw. She was on her phone constantly, texting with someone she never mentioned. I didn't need to ask who it was. I already knew. The late nights continued, each one punctuated by a flimsy excuse. The distance between us grew, like a canyon widening with every passing day. But still, there was one question that haunted me more than anything. Who was the man she was seeing? The days following my discovery were some of the hardest I'd ever experienced. Every morning, I watched Sarah walk out the door with that same smile, the same routine, pretending like everything was normal. But I knew better now. Each step she took away from me felt like a punch in the gut. And yet, I kept quiet. I had to. If I confronted her without enough proof, she'd twist it around. I wasn't going to give her that chance. Instead, I started planning. I began with small things, little actions she wouldn't notice. I tracked her schedule more carefully, making mental notes of when she left for work, when she claimed she'd be home, and when she actually came home. Most nights, she was back around 9 or 10, always with some excuse about staying late for meetings or grabbing dinner with colleagues. But now I knew better than to believe her. It wasn't just the late nights that tipped me off. It was the subtle changes in her behavior. She was always glued to her phone, sneaking quick looks at her messages, smiling at something she never shared with me. When she'd catch me watching, she'd quickly put the phone down, pretending like it was nothing. But I knew. I knew what she was hiding. And each day it became harder to pretend like I didn't. One evening, I decided to take things a step further. Sarah was at work late again, and I was home alone. The house felt eerily quiet, like it knew something was wrong. My mind kept racing back to the messages, the late nights, and that nagging question. Who was she seeing? I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. I needed answers. Real answers. Not just suspicions or assumptions. I needed to know who this man was. I needed to see it for myself. So I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I called a friend of mine, Tyler. We've been friends for years, ever since college, and he worked as a private investigator. I never imagined I'd be the guy who needed to hire someone like him, but desperate times call for desperate measures. When I explained the situation, Tyler didn't seem surprised. I've seen this before, man, he said. You need proof, real proof. If she's cheating, I can help you get what you need. It stung to hear him say it so bluntly, but I knew he was right. We agreed to meet the next day to go over a plan. He'd follow Sarah, keep track of where she went, who she met, and, if necessary, get photographic evidence. It felt wrong, dirty even, to have to spy on my own wife. But what choice did I have? That night, I lay in bed next to Sarah, my mind buzzing with the decision I'd made. She slept peacefully, as if nothing was wrong, but I couldn't close my eyes. I kept thinking about what Tyler might find, about what I might have to face. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. We were supposed to be partners, to grow old together. We were supposed to have trust, to be honest with each other. But now I couldn't even look at her without wondering what lies she was telling, what secrets she was keeping. I stayed up late, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and sadness. I didn't want to believe she was capable of doing this to me, to us. But I couldn't ignore the facts. The messages, the distance, the hotel key card, the box I found in her closet. It all pointed to the same inevitable conclusion. The next morning, Tyler and I met at a small cafe on the edge of town. He laid out the plan in simple terms. I'll follow her, keep a low profile, and report back to you. If there's something going on, we'll find out. I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision sink in. There was no turning back now. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. For the next few days, I waited. It felt like time had slowed to a crawl. Each hour that passed without hearing from Tyler felt like torture. I kept replaying the moments I'd noticed something was off. The perfume that wasn't hers, the hotel key card, the nights she came home late with that look in her eyes. All the small details I'd ignored, hoping they didn't mean anything, now seemed like giant red flags waving in my face. Finally, the call came. "Mark," Tyler said on the other end of the line, his voice serious. "I've got something." My heart dropped. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone tighter. "What is it?" "There's definitely something going on," Tyler said. "She's been meeting someone regularly, same place, same time." I felt my stomach twist. I already knew what he was going to say, but hearing it made it real. "Do you know who it is?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought Tyler wasn't going to answer. "I'm still working on that," he finally said. I couldn't get a clear view of the guy's face, but I'll find out soon enough. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. The confirmation hit me like a ton of bricks, even though I'd been expecting it. Sarah was seeing someone else, and now there was no denying it. But there was still one question that haunted me. Who was this man? I didn't know him, but I would soon. And when I did, I wasn't sure what I'd do. After that call from Tyler, something inside me snapped. I'd been holding on to hope, some sliver of denial that maybe, just maybe, I had it all wrong. But now I knew. Sarah had betrayed me, and not just with lies or distant affection. She had betrayed the very foundation of our marriage. And that was something I couldn't let go. But I wasn't going to fly off the handle. I wasn't going to scream, shout, or beg her to stay. No, I had a different plan, something far more calculated. If she thought she could get away with destroying everything we built, she had another thing coming. The first step in my plan was simple: gather more information. Tyler was already tracking her movements, and with every new piece of evidence he brought me, the picture became clearer. I didn't just want to know she was cheating. I wanted to know everything. Where she was, who she was with, how long it had been going on, and most importantly, how I could use this information to destroy her life piece by piece. It was all about patience. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I needed to be smart. The kind of revenge I was after wasn't the kind that exploded in a single moment. No, I wanted something slow, something that would unravel her life until she was left standing in the ruins of her own choices. The first move I made was subtle, almost too small to notice. I knew Sarah's career was everything to her. She had worked hard to climb the corporate ladder, and she prided herself on being the perfect employee, the dependable, high-performing attorney. But what happens when that reputation starts to crack? One evening, while Sarah was out again, I made my way into her office at home. She had a company laptop, one she kept meticulously organized. I knew the passwords. She hadn't changed them in years. It was easy to get in. What I was looking for were emails, correspondences with her boss, colleagues, anything I could use to plant the seeds of doubt in her professional life. It didn't take long. I found a series of emails between Sarah and her team about an upcoming project. It was the perfect opportunity. I forwarded a few key emails to myself, ones that discussed deadlines, confidential information, and some internal conflicts. Then, I carefully crafted a few fake responses, ones that would make it seem like Sarah was leaking information or worse, not pulling her weight on the project. I sent the fake emails from her account late at night, knowing that her boss and coworkers would see them first thing in the morning. It was a small move, just enough to make them question her competence. She wouldn't notice right away. But when the project hit a snag and fingers started pointing in her direction, she'd start to feel the pressure. But I wasn't done. The next part of my plan involved our finances. Over the years, Sarah and I had built up quite a bit of savings. We shared a few joint accounts, but there were some investments she didn't pay close attention to, ones I'd managed over the years. I wasn't planning on wiping out our accounts entirely. That would be too obvious. Instead, I started moving small amounts of money into separate private accounts under my name. Nothing too drastic, just a few thousand here and there, enough to go unnoticed for now. By the time she realized what was happening, it would be too late. I'd have enough to walk away comfortably, and she'd be left scrambling to figure out where the money had gone. But the real blow would come from her family. Sarah had always been close to her parents, especially her father. He was a proud man, old-fashioned in his values, and he adored Sarah. He believed in loyalty, in family, and in the sanctity of marriage. I knew that if he found out what she'd been doing, if he knew she was cheating on me, he'd never look at her the same way again. So, I started planting the seeds. At our next family gathering, I made sure to pull Sarah's father aside for a little chat. I didn't come right out and accuse her of anything. That would have been too obvious. No, I played the concerned, loving husband. I told him I was worried about Sarah, that she seemed distant lately, stressed out, maybe even depressed. I said I wasn't sure what was going on, but I felt like there was something she wasn't telling me. Her father listened, his brow furrowing with concern. He loved Sarah, but he loved me too. Over the years, we'd built a bond of trust, and I knew he'd take what I said seriously. She's been working late a lot, I said, my voice low, like I was trying to protect her. I don't want to accuse her of anything, but I just feel like something's off. That was all I needed to say. I saw the doubt flicker across his face, the worry settle into his eyes. He would start watching her more closely now, and when the time was right, I'd make sure he knew exactly what she'd done. By the time I was finished, Sarah would be isolated. Her career, her finances, her family, all in ruins. And then there was the final part of my plan, the public humiliation. But that would come later. For now, I was content to watch the pieces start to fall. One by one, Sarah's life would unravel, and she wouldn't even see it coming. That night, when Sarah came home, she kissed me on the cheek, just like she always did, and I kissed her back, pretending everything was fine. She had no idea that the wheels were already in motion, that her perfect little world was about to crumble. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger, the hurt, it was all still there, simmering beneath the surface. But now I had control. Now I had a plan. And soon, she would feel the weight of every lie she'd told, every betrayal she'd made. And when she did, there would be no escape. The following weeks passed in slow motion, but every day, I could see the cracks starting to show. It began at her job, just as I had planned. The fake emails I'd sent from her account had stirred up some quiet chaos within her company. It wasn't immediate, but after a couple of meetings missed, a few projects mishandled, none of which were actually her fault, the murmurs began. I could see it in her face when she came home. She looked exhausted, her brow constantly furrowed, her usually confident stride reduced to something more uncertain. She didn't talk about work as much anymore, which only confirmed that things were starting to unravel. I heard her on the phone one night talking to someone from the office. Her voice was tense, defensive. "They've been questioning my judgment," she said. "I don't know where this is coming from." I sat in the next room, listening quietly, feeling a grim satisfaction knowing that I was the one pulling the strings. Her job, the thing she valued almost as much as her marriage, was slipping through her fingers, and she had no idea that it wasn't just bad luck. It was part of the plan, but the real damage was about to begin. One Friday afternoon, after Sarah had left for yet another work meeting, I received a call from Tyler. "Mark, you're going to want to hear this," he said. I could hear the seriousness in his voice. "What is it?" I asked, already knowing the answer was going to hit hard. "She's meeting him today. It's all set up. I've got everything. Photos, details, everything you need." My heart pounded as he told me the name. The man Sarah had been seeing wasn't just some random fling. It was someone close. My brother. My own flesh and blood. The shock hit me like a freight train. I stood there, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had suspected a betrayal, but this was beyond anything I had prepared for. Tyler continued talking, giving me details of the affair, but I barely heard him. My mind was racing, trying to process what he just said. My brother, the man I had grown up with, trusted, had been sneaking around with my wife. Everything fell into place, the little clues, the distance, the secrecy. It all pointed to the most unimaginable betrayal. I hung up the phone and stared out the window, my chest tightening with a fury I hadn't felt before. I had been planning to take Sarah down slowly, strategically, but this changed everything. That night, I put the final stage of my plan into motion. It was time for the public humiliation. I had waited long enough, and now that I knew the full extent of their betrayal, I wasn't going to hold back. The opportunity came faster than I had expected. A few days later, we had a family gathering. Sarah's parents, my brother, everyone was going to be there. It was the perfect stage for what I had in mind. I knew that exposing her infidelity in front of everyone would be the final nail in her coffin, and it would cut deeper than she ever expected. I arrived at the gathering with a calm exterior, but inside, my heart was racing. Sarah was there, acting like everything was fine, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. She laughed, made small talk with our families, but I could see it, the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided looking me directly in the eye. She knew something was off, but she had no idea how bad it was going to get. Halfway through the evening, as we all sat around the table, I decided it was time. I stood up, clearing my throat, and tapped my glass, drawing everyone's attention. Sarah looked up at me, confused. I smiled at her, a cold, knowing smile, and then I began. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, I said, my voice steady. About life, about family, about what it means to trust someone. Sarah's face paled. She knew something was coming. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of fear as the room went silent. And I've come to realize, I continued, that sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who betray us in the worst possible way. There was a murmur around the table, but I didn't stop. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. I've learned some things recently. About my wife. About my brother. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. My brother, sitting across from me, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew. He knew what was coming. I didn't need to say anything more. I opened the folder on my phone, the one filled with photos Tyler had taken. The ones of Sarah and my brother together, wrapped in each other's arms, kissing in the dim light of a hotel room. I slid the phone across the table, letting everyone see the evidence for themselves. The silence was deafening. Sarah's parents were the first to react. Her mother gasped, her father's face turning red with anger. My mother stared at the photos in disbelief, while my father clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. And my brother? He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Sarah sat frozen, her face drained of all color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The betrayal, the lies, it was all laid bare in front of everyone she cared about. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I stood up, walked out of the room, and left the house, leaving her to deal with the wreckage. The fallout was immediate. Sarah's father called me the next day, furious with her for destroying our marriage. He told me she had tried to explain, tried to justify her actions, but he wouldn't listen. She's not the daughter I thought I raised, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. My brother? We haven't spoken since. As far as I'm concerned, he's no longer part of my life. He made his choice, and now he has to live with it. Sarah's life, once so perfectly controlled, had fallen apart. Her family was furious with her. Her job was on the line, and the whispers of her betrayal spread through our circle of friends like wildfire. She was left alone, isolated, the very thing she had once taken for granted. Her career, her reputation, her family, all crumbled to dust. And me? I walked away from it all free. In the weeks after the family confrontation, everything around Sarah fell apart. The scandal spread quickly, among friends, coworkers, and family. Her parents were devastated, especially her father, who felt utterly betrayed. My brother vanished from family gatherings, unable to face the fallout. And Sarah, once so confident, was left grasping at the remnants of her life. At work, the damage I'd set in motion took root. Her reputation began to crumble. The fake emails I sent from her account, the subtle mistakes that piled up, one after another, they painted a picture of incompetence and dishonesty. She faced disciplinary action, and whispers of her unreliability spread throughout the office. A leave of absence followed, but by the time she returned, the damage had been done. Her once solid career had become shaky ground. But while Sarah's world collapsed, I felt something unexpected: relief. After months of suspicion, heartbreak, and planning, I was finally free. The weight I'd been carrying for so long began to lift. It wasn't just about Sarah's destruction. It was about taking back my life. It all started innocently enough, with that strange perfume on a regular Wednesday. I ignored the warning signs at first, her late nights, the distance between us. But when I found those messages on her phone, I couldn't look away anymore. That's when I knew I had to take control. I gathered the proof, hired Tyler to track her, and uncovered the painful truth that she was cheating on me with my own brother. Confronting her wasn't enough for me. I wanted more than just an argument. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions. That's why I laid out the perfect plan, targeting her career, her family, and her reputation. It was slow, methodical, and in the end, devastating. The final blow came when I exposed her affair in front of her entire family. The look on her face, the shock, the guilt, was all the confirmation I needed that she knew her perfect world had come crashing down. But after everything was said and done, something changed. At first, I thought seeing her life in ruins would make me feel better. And it did for a little while. But the truth is, the satisfaction from revenge doesn't last. I realized that moving on, truly moving on, was what would bring me peace. And that's exactly what I did. I sold the house, left behind the memories, and started focusing on myself. I reconnected with old friends, started new hobbies, and spent time rediscovering who I was outside of the marriage. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And then I met Lisa. I wasn't looking for anything serious at first, but Lisa came into my life at the perfect time. She was warm, kind, and genuine, everything Sarah wasn't. We clicked almost instantly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. There were no games, no lies, just two people who enjoyed being together. Now, years later, I'm in a place I never thought I'd be again. Happy. Sarah is nothing more than a distant memory, a chapter I've closed for good. I don't think about her or the betrayal anymore. Instead, I'm focused on my life, on my new relationship with Lisa, on the things I enjoy, on the peace I've found. Looking back, I realize that sometimes life falls apart so that better things can fall into place. And in the end, I'm thankful for that.